The dream of third-party total inclusion on Nintendo Switch has yet to be fully realized, but could 2019 be the year? Could 2019 be the peak for third-party plus Nintendo Switch? We know that Doom Eternal is making a big mark by releasing day and date next year, and you'd imagine that other companies will have their comfortability and success thresholds met as well. So before next gen arrives, will 2019 be as good as it gets for the Switch and third parties?
I mean, that'd be the hope, right? That for the third calendar year of Switch, third party is fully on board after some pattern of success. The Switch continues to sell well. We see third parties selling well. So why wouldn't they, right? You made indication here that Doom Eternal coming is a fantastic first step, and I hope that other publishers follow suit. But you did kind of touch on one thing that, I feel is going to be the crux of the video here with next gen looming, right? And no one expects for it to be released next year. There are even indications that it might not even be announced until the year after. But I think once people get a whiff of that, whether it be PS5 or Xbox 2, third party's going to probably want to switch over, right? So 2019 seems to be the sweet spot for Switch, right?
Absolutely. So once you have sort of those A teams moving on, it becomes even more difficult to bridge that gap. And we're seeing companies seemingly take really nice risks. We've heard that the Rage team is even exploring the idea of bringing Rage 2 to Switch at some point. And Bethesda in general is just really doing wonders for us as Switch owners. I think you would hope that the sales and just the time spent working with the platform and understanding the platform and seeing the success of other titles would allow for next year to be really great. And you may say, okay, well, next year will be really great and then 2020 better. But yeah, next gen, by all accounts, 2020 seems like the time for that. And once you start having that shift, it's not to say that they couldn't still bring games over, but once you start prepping the Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creeds and all of those titles for the future platforms, it becomes even more difficult to see or expect them releasing also on Switch.
Yeah, parity was obviously not a concern for a third party right out the gate, right? A good example is Dragon Quest that recently got announced that hey, it's not coming to Switch until sometime next year. The Switch port wasn't a super high priority. I'm sure if they had a time machine, they would go back and make it a priority just because Square Enix has done so well on Switch, but the resources just weren't there right away. And I think it's time for them to start putting them there. Doom Eternal, fantastic sign of that. I do wonder, what other games, third party, series at least, can we think of that we could see coming next year, day and date? Do you know of any, just off the top of your head?
I would hope, even if it's a flash in the pan 1 year type ordeal, that we would get the majors. We would get the Maddens and the Call of Duties and whatever Ubisoft has on tap for next fall. And then if that happens, you look and say, okay, maybe we could get Switch exclusive versions, or, they would shift a different team onto making the Switch version. But I do wonder if, on the other hand, hey, they haven't brought something like Assassin's Creed yet to Switch. Hey, they haven't brought Madden yet to Switch. As they start gearing up for PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2, does it just become not in the cards for them to ever include the Nintendo platform, knowing that going forward, it would be even a larger undertaking to make happen?
Yeah, we know that whatever the next platforms are, it's going to be baseline 4K, right? So, yeah, then it just becomes so hard to develop, hey, we're doing this in 4K. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. It's going to push technology, and then also, hey, 720p on your Switch, That's such a difference that it almost has to be completely separate teams that are working this.
Yeah.
People like Panic Button, but the Panic Button can only do so much. So we need other developers to kind of come into the fold.
More buttons.
Yeah, a Panic Button,
not just the Panic Button.
Afraid Button, Concerned Button.
Or just a really nice, good button. I personally, if I'm going to throw my own 2 cents in, I think next year will be fantastic for third party. I think once you're looking at 30, 40, eventually 50 million Switch out there, you can't ignore that. So long as these titles continue to sell well, and so long as the groundwork is laid, you'd be silly to sit out. And so I do think that next year will be the sweet spot. Maybe not for the the first party stuff. I think we'll get a great lineup of games from Metroid to Fire Emblem. But Nintendo always has more tricks up their sleeve, and usually you see consoles really hitting their stride around years 3, 4, and 5, and sometimes even beyond if it's an elongated generation. That's when you'll start getting like the real games of the generation type games, when the development process has become so entrenched that now it's just about flourishes, right? It's just about doing going above and beyond and making games that exceed expectations. So you would think that third party will be very strong next year. I believe it will. But I do feel like it will be the peak, because I think, as they have in the past, Nintendo sits in the in-between, right? And that's fine for them. We're not commenting in any way on the fact that, like, oh, they shouldn't have done that. I think their success speaks for itself. But from a third-party standpoint, I do feel like it's not going to, like, disappear. It's not going to vanish. But if Doom Eternal is a sign of things to come, I would imagine, like, it's going to be, like, that's probably getting close to the limit of what's possible for this platform.
You're not going to like where I'm going with this, but, like, Switch is almost, and it's, when I say niche, I don't mean niche because it's clearly very popular, but it's such a perfect place for different games, right? We see something like Octopath shine on Switch, and we don't know that it would shine if it were like on all the platforms. Like, I don't know if that game has the exact same impact if it's multi-platform than it does if it's on Switch only. Things like Valkyria, I envision will do like really well. Valkyria Chronicles 4, that release is impending now, and that's a day-and-date release. That's a third-party release. So, there's another example of that there. But if Switch can continue to like flourish with the core, with the very core, like we're talking like JRPGs and things like that, I think they're going to be good. On top of that, they have like a tremendous indie support. Gone Home was just announced this morning. It's an older game by this point, but if you've never played it, just because you're only on Nintendo platforms, like that game's going to be on a Nintendo platform now. That's really cool. And on top of that, their first party stuff, like Switch is going to be okay. Like you said, I'm not worried about them long term. It's just third party. Yeah, I think next year is the year, because after that, people are gonna want to move. And by people, I mean the people making the games. Like, they're gonna have other things to worry about.
Well, and I'll throw in sort of the potential that next year is the peak in terms of day and date, in terms of multi-platform releases, in terms of parity. What could happen, though, is given that the Switch will continue to succeed, it's not like, oh, just because next gen is announced, the Switch is going to tank. Maybe that is where we start to see many more collections, ports, and sort of... It's almost like a cycle. Like, early on we got that, and then we're hitting like a year, maybe a year and a half of, hey, like, we're cool to bring our new games over, and then it might return. Like, who's to say in 2020, hey, EA can package up Dead Space and bring that collection to Switch, and 2K can package BioShock and bring that collection to Switch, and it may be an opportunity to... Maybe that is how they continue to invest in the platform. If it's not going to be their own games, or Perfect World, Gabe, we get many more exclusives. We get many more Mario plus Rabbids style experiences, and that one's probably more of a pipe dream than a reality. But if there is not the potential or the possibility to bring over, Call of Duty 2021 to the Switch, maybe they get an exclusive version. Or if there's not the possibility, from Watch Dogs 3, then maybe you get some more curated, specialized experience, which in the end, maybe that could be, a fantastic outcome.
And that's what I was touching on with the Octopath Traveler thing. I don't mean to keep harkening back to that game, but, that shows that the Switch audience will buy a game if it's, like, good. It doesn't matter the genre. JRPGs is as niche as it gets, especially, like, traditional JRPGs that are turn-based and are still $60. So if you put something like truly like awesome and creative out there that doesn't like look that traditional, it looks a little bit more modern, but it's still like really good, like it could do really well on Switch because the audience wants amazing things to play. And Nintendo, for as much as they want to put something out every single one, like it's hard for them to do it all themselves. Like, yeah, they're clearly trying. They still have a lot of awesome stuff in the pipeline, but third party needs to be there. And this is a far cry from where Nintendo was last generation, right? The Wii U didn't have like any stuff like this for the most part after the first year, and now Switch, in what we're predicting year 3 is going to be like the best year for third party. It's a big step in the right direction for third party.
Absolutely, and who knows? Maybe it doesn't then take a step back. I just feel like, as we've discussed, once you make that tonal shift towards looking forward and putting development resources there, the disparity begins to show up more and more.
I'll say this will never happen, but I wish Nintendo were to like get back in the like console race. Not like, oh, like we're gonna have stronger hardware than PS5. No, that's not what I mean. But Xbox and PS5 are gonna launch around the same time, right? Given maybe a 6-month to a 12-month margin, like they're gonna release relatively near each other. And by all accounts, Nintendo isn't. Like they're gonna be like a full maybe 2 years after, if we are going to trust what they've said of the life cycle that they expect for Switch. So I kind of wish that they got back into that race a little bit. Again, not graphics-wise, just like, hey, we're all coming out like right around the same time. Like, I think that would do tremendously for third party as well.
And that sort of brings me to my next point, which is, does the introduction of next gen open the door for Nintendo to introduce a mid-cycle upgrade? And do they see the growth of third-party support and obviously the continued success of sales and want to achieve more parity and want to move in a direction that allows and encourages third parties to stay on board? And is that something that, to counter the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox 2, one option is you get a nice price drop, and so before you know it, the Switch is seeming super budget at $250 compared to a $500 new console? Or does Nintendo do what we've wondered and discussed for since the beginning now, and introduce an upgraded model?
Yeah, I think they would probably go towards more a price drop. Personally, I think that's what they would do. I think it's just way too soon for them. They don't seem to care about any disparate, like any like separation as far as like graphical power. Like they don't. That's not the business they're in anymore, and they haven't been for a long time. So I don't expect that whatsoever. But I mean, it'd be nice.
I mean, they're okay with the gap currently, right? But if the gap becomes a full generation, to give you just an idea, the PlayStation 4 launched in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And the PlayStation 4 Pro launched in 2016. So it would not be unheard of to see a year 4 upgrade. That's not too little time. It's not. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And we know that Nintendo on the handheld side loves to do things like that. They love to iterate. Consoles, a different story. But I very much wonder what those internal conversations are like and what is already, what gears are already spinning. I have to imagine that they're at least experimenting with the idea of doing something to counter and doing something to move the Switch to maintain its unique spot in the industry while continuing to evolve its specs. I don't know that it's that crazy. I think that's something that could be very likely.
Leave Switch as is. You're ushering 3DS out. It had an amazing run. Switch is your new 3DS. This is now your handheld platform. You just happen to be able to play on your TV, and then give us like the next like big console. But that's not the state of mind that they're in, clearly, unfortunately. But I mean, that if I were running Nintendo, that's kind of what I would do.
I don't think transitioning the Switch from a home console to a handheld is probably in the cards. We've heard the talk of them discussing another handheld, a 3DS successor. And perhaps that is what they use then to counter. I don't know that that's my personal pick for what I do, but I could see that happening as well, where they then, instead of trying to fight head on, sort of take the end around approach and, okay, we're going to then just monopolize this market space and try to dominate from a different direction. But I think perfect world, they do come out with an upgrade at some point. Again, if Doom Eternal can run on Switch, you get a nice little boost in there. We could be seeing, a third-party support continued, but 2019 being the sweet spot would be great. I would love to see more than Bethesda and Panic Button, as you mentioned, like put their full muscle behind this. I think we were a bit surprised that it did not happen this year and that E3 was frankly underwhelming when it came to third-party support. We know Nintendo is going to deliver for us, and we know they'll deliver in 2019, and they'll deliver in 2020 and every year beyond. But I do you gotta imagine that, like we said at the top, these comfortability and success thresholds, they have to be met at this point. So if it's gonna happen, next year is the time, and hopefully we don't deal with Dark Souls delays, and hopefully we don't deal with Madden missing, and hopefully we get that total support that seemed possible once we started to see this thing skyrocket. So let us know in the comments down below how you feel about 2019 and third parties on Switch. Do you think it'll be the sweet spot? Do you think next gen will be a death knell for multi-platform day and date releases? Or do you think that somehow they'll figure out a way, whether via an upgrade or Nintendo Magic, to continue? Or do you take the opposite and say that third-party support will stay as is in 2019, outside of a few outliers like Doom Eternal won't be that much different? Definitely curious to hear your thoughts and get a discussion going in the comments down below. We'll be reading those. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all the latest and greatest from the Switch as we continue to sort through this generation. And make sure to follow us on Twitter and Discord. We got links in the description below. For myself and Gabe, thanks again for watching. A fantastic day. Switch Force out.